Hey guys, my name is Kevin, and the research method that I was looking into this week is program evaluation. And as you can see, program evaluation has a very intricate definition, but from what I understood, it's just a systematic way to determine whether a program is doing what it was designed to do and that it's doing what it needs to do effectively. Also, during the readings, I realized that it is slightly different than regular research in the sense that the main goal of program evaluation is to improve as opposed to research is to kind of prove something. And that means that the program evaluation is really initiated by the needs of a stakeholder, whether that be a company, an individual, institution like a school or a medical field and stuff like that. But it also has a very narrow approach. It's looking at a program or a set of programs or initiatives. So some of the history of it, basically evaluation goes back to 1792, in which William Farish used quantitative marks to evaluate students based on performance. And then you have a huge gap up until the 1930s, in which you see a more broad approach to program evaluation, in which Ralph Tyler looked at 15 different schools from traditional to more progressive and looked at the student outcomes. And this kind of differed from what was going on back then in terms of more scientific research, in which you had control groups and variables and manipulating variables and stuff like that that was going on. This was more like observational. And then in 1965, Robert F. Kennedy introduced the ESEA Act, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, in order to make sure that programs, institutions, educational institutions were using funds in order to improve student outcomes. That it wasn't just, hey, here's some funds and you use them the way you've been usually using them instead of and not determining whether the programs you're using them on are effective or not. And then we get to today, nowadays, is it's very much more intertwined and integrated into different types of fields. So you see it predominantly in the medical field, education, but also now in the professional field as well. And from the medical field, we do get the CDC framework as to how to go about assessing program evaluation. So we're going to first start looking at that outer band in this little diagram, and that is the cross-cutting actions. There are three actions, and they are basically the foundational principles in which program evaluation must be built. I love the house analogy. So it's like it's the foundation, and then you build everything else on top of that. So based on that diagram, these are the three things we need to be doing prior to even initiating the actual development of evaluating a program. So one of them is advance equity. We got to make sure it's fair. And it's very much in proactive about advocating for different minority groups or cultures, etc. We're taking everything into account. So we got to be very proactive and basically look to see in ways where we may come up short in terms of equality, fairness, and getting participation from different points of view. The next one is to engage collaboratively, right? So you have to make sure that you bring in a group. It's not just one person taking all the load. It's making sure that, hey, we get a whole lot of viewpoints on this one issue or one evaluation in order to move forward. And then the next one is learn from and using insights. So basically being adaptive, being able to see, hey, here's what I get from my evaluation, here's what I'm getting from the data. Let's make sure that we are using this effectively and making the changes as needed. The next part that we're going into is that central part right there with the standards. There are 5 of them, and they are basically, we're building up the foundation from the foundation using these standards. And they are very broad in order to give institutions the flexibility to determine kind of where they want to be in terms of like these 5 standards. The first one is relevance and utility. So this is where we get into how program evaluation is very much determined by the stakeholders' needs. It has to be relevant to them. They have to want to buy into it. So, hey, the program improvements have to be done based on what their current needs are. It also has to be actionable. Like, for example, you cannot just initiate a program or initiate an evaluation without having any uses for it. It has to make sure that you are able to use whatever findings you get in order to improve the program. In terms of the next standard is rigor. You have to have thorough planning, make sure everything is accounted for in order to instill that confidence into your stakeholders and into the improvements you're trying to do with the evaluation. Independence and objectivity. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, where it has to be free from influence, free from bias, in order to make sure that the findings are valid and are able to be applicable for everybody else. Transparency is also another one, in which, hey, as long as you communicate effectively and clearly, you get a lot more confidence. So they all kind of intertwine with each other in terms of developing the validity for that program evaluation. And then ethics. You have to have the highest standards, make sure everything is done to the T, up to par, and make sure you're considering all factors. You know, once again, we get back to the equity of it. So all these standards are what you're going to build upon whenever you do your program evaluation. So then we actually get to the 6 steps that are required for the program evaluation. I know you're probably thinking like, hey, this is a whole lot of work on the front end, and there's a lot more work to be done. So there are 6 steps, like I said. And the first step is to assess the context. You have to know kind of, hey, where am I at? Is the program ready to be evaluated? At which point are we evaluating? So is it basically at the beginning, middle, or end? Which part am I evaluating? So you got to make sure that you know all of this. You identify your stakeholders, who's going to collaborate with you. You're assessing the evaluation capacity and making sure that everybody is able and ready to make this evaluation happen. So these are just like the planning stages. So you're making sure that everything is in line. You know who's going to do what, and basically you're kind of planning it out how you're going to go about it and what needs to happen. That leads us to the next part. The second step is describing what you're going to do, right? So this is where you develop a logic map, and I have placed one on the side right here where it has different components to it, whether it be from the inputs all the way to the long-term outcomes. This map describes kind of what you're going to do. And then you also have to have a narrative description of kind of what you want to happen. So this is where you take all ideas of what you got from the context and put them down on paper and kind of map it out and see kind of where you're going to do what and who's going to do what and what you expect to happen or what you want to happen. After that, you get to the focus and evaluation question and design. This is where you're kind of putting everything into play, in a sense. You're identifying the intended users and uses. You're determining kind of what type of evaluation you're going to do. You're determining the questions you're going to ask, and you're going to determine your evaluation design. So here's where you get to decide. Here's where qualitative and quantitative data come into play in terms of determining the type of evaluation you're going to do. So you're looking at all of that. And here are some of the types of evaluation. So you got formative, process evaluation, outcome evaluation, income, impact evaluation, and economic. The formative, you could do at the beginning just to make sure that the program is feasible. You can do it. You have the resources and you're able to do it. Process evaluation, it's how aligned your program is with the plan you had. And that can be done at the beginning as well. The outcome is done at the end just to make sure, hey, was what I planned to happen, did it actually happen? The impact is, hey, how did my program impact, and what were the outcomes of it with the program and then without the program? And then economic evaluation goes into how much did it cost compared to how much was I planning to spend, how much did it actually cost, or am I going to be able to initiate this program based on the funds I have? So it can determine that resource allocation and funding as well. So once you got all that gathered, then you're going to gather the evidence. Here's where you determine, hey, how am I going to collect the data? What kind of data do I want? And at each point in time, you do have to be very specific and have to plan out everything the way you kind of want it to make it happen. And it has to be detailed, it has to be clear, it has to be communicated effectively, because you can risk the dangers of, hey, I'm gathering all this data, but is it really working? Is it really the data I need? So that's where going back and asking those right questions of what do I need to ask? What kind of data am I looking for? And then we get to here collecting that data. And you can collect that data usually the same as we've learned so far in this class, like questionnaires, surveys, interviews, any type of way you can collect data in order to answer the questions that you that you set up initially. And so after all that data collecting and kind of monitoring, you have to generate that support and conclusions, right? You gather all that data, you analyze it, you look at it, and you say, hey, what did I find? What can I get from this? And that gets us into the acting on the findings. You take that data, that analysis that you did, and you say, hey, improvements can be made here, here, and here. Let's communicate that with our stakeholders. Hey, this is the data we found. This is what it showed. And this is what we plan to do. And we're going to assign this person, and this person to go ahead and make that happen. So as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of people have to come in. A lot of people have to buy in order to make that happen. And so you have to work collaboratively to facilitate that transition, to make sure those initiatives and those improvements are implemented, and make sure that after the evaluation is done, you can keep continuing to move forward. And that leads us kind of to the strengths of this program evaluation. It's a continuous improvement process, because the goal is to improve. So you do all this to make sure that you're improving, to get those best practices in, and it allows stakeholders to buy in. It can increase their buy-in. It also shows them the effectiveness of the program. It puts forth accountability to the people who are implementing this program. It provides clarity and transparency if done effectively. So all these strengths only work if it's done effectively. And as I said, hey, there's a lot of planning that goes into it, a lot of moving parts, so to speak. And so it also finally it aids in decision making and improving resource allocations. With that being said, there are some weaknesses for this program type of evaluation. It requires an immense amount of planning. Like I said, you have to be detailed from the moment you begin. From brainstorming those ideas, you have to make sure you are detailed with those ideas, with the logic plan and narrative, and then the data collection. You have to be very on point on top of it and working collaboratively with everybody. And so if someone is not on buying in, or kind of doing their part, or coming together as a team, or it's not working effectively, or it's not being clear, then a lot of things can go wrong with it. You're not going to get the data you need. That might lead to ineffective approaches. And so sometimes the stakeholders will be resistant to the change or to the improvements or the program itself. With human involvement, it does bring some type of bias into it. So, and also it can be very difficult to implement with complex processes. So it is one of those that it's beneficial when done correctly. So in my mind, when looking back at it, you can apply this in a school to determine, from a leadership standpoint, you can apply this to a school, a campus, in order to determine whether, hey, is this curriculum working? Let's take a look at it. Is it being done effectively by teachers? Is my implementation standardized throughout the whole, all the grade levels? And is each teacher implementing it? And if not, what can we go back to? How can we improve it? And so on and so forth. So I can see the benefits for it in an educational setting in order to improve those teaching practices, that curriculum that you're using. So campus culture, etc. So I can see the benefits of that. And I think that this one would be very useful to use as a future principal. So thank you.